Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Always delighted when we have time to sit down with our good buddy, Ken LaCorte. Ken is the former executive there at Fox News, and then he had a revelation and got out. He's the host of Elephants in the Room podcast, and that is a great podcast. Elephants in the Rooms podcast, and you can do that on YouTube. Just check it out at Elephants in the Room. And he does have his own website, kenlacorte.substack.com, and there's a picture of that landing page. Hey, buddy, how you doing, man?
I'm doing very well. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Short time, a lot of questions. I've been watching the testimony of NPR and PBS, which is kind of interesting. But at the end of the day, you think they're heading for defunding?
I think there's a good chance of that. There was a time where there were certain elements that couldn't. There were certain news and media elements that the free market didn't take care of good enough. And the best person to ever give that defense was Mr. Rogers back in the day, when his show had a very unique, probably not commercially successful ability of a show versus all the crazy cartoons and whatnot. I think we've largely passed that. And there just doesn't, it's hard to come up with an intellectual argument why we should forcibly take some money from some of our citizens and hand it to have a government-run news organization.
Isn't that the bottom line? We don't want a state-run media.
I think so. Now, I would argue that much of Voice of America should still be on the air and in different ways, because getting our message into certain countries that might not have a free message can be important. So hopefully they don't completely kill that one, that they keep it around in some form. But, you know, why do we need another CBS News that we pay for? And, you know, it's kind of funny, because how many years have you always heard the NPR people that always come up and say, you know, only 2% of our funding comes from the federal government? You heard that repeat. I've heard that for the last 20 years. And yet, if the federal government pulls its money, it's going to disappear, they're saying. So what it told you was, for the last 20 years, they've been lying about that. They played financial games where their member stations were paid for by taxpayer dollars at colleges and a lot of these, you know, kind of crazy lefty radio networks around the country that are funded by taxes. And it was a numbers game, and it goes to show you how kind of unethical they were about telling the truth.
Well, did you watch any of the testimonies? I mean, they're denying everything you and I are talking about.
I mean, yeah. They're just that's they and the truth. Look, like so many journalists on the left and I hate to say it, on the right, they have become politicized outlets, as opposed to, I'm going to give you a truly fair and balanced look at the world. And you rarely see that anymore.
Well, content's one thing. I had the chance to visit one of their studios that was supposedly redeveloped by grant money. And I'm telling you, Ken, for those of us in broadcasting, you obviously have a rich history in it. You walk in there, and it's the best that money can buy. You know. Yeah,
money doesn't matter. You can do fun things. When it's not yours and nobody really has oversight and care about it, you can buy great things.
Yeah. So what do you think about the recent uncovering of COVID?
You know, it is like people went down a memory hole and forgot about so many things that happened on this. But, you know, what has clearly become now just a slowly leaked out truth is that COVID leaked from a lab. No reason to say that it was intentional. It doesn't make any sense that if China's going to leak it out intentionally, they do it in China. You know, you put it in a bottle and send it to New York. And as I wrote recently on this, because it is when we look back at the media, when we look back at the health industry, from Fauci down there, they were all absolutely misleading us. Many of them were intentionally lying, including the scientist that he got together early on who came up with this cockamamie theory that it was a bat that somehow worked its way 1,000 miles from where these bats had coronavirus and somehow ended up in somebody's soup a quarter mile away from where the level 4 lab that was making coronavirus worse. It was the average, you know, if you didn't go to college and if you knew nothing about science, the day you heard it, it was like, oh, it clearly came from that. And then all the smart and official people told us we were all bad. They banned us from Facebook and Twitter. They took videos off of YouTube. They did all of those things. The media, because of course Trump said it first, so therefore, I mean, if Trump cured cancer, they'd be whining about the oncologists who lost their jobs. And it was a perfect storm where all of our virtually all of our top experts and institutions completely failed us, and often intentionally so. It was and the sad thing is, none of them even got a hand slap. Okay. China paid no price for sloppily doing this. Our scientists, they were out there playing with fire, and they poisoned the world. And they didn't have a problem. You can still go on Amazon and buy a prayer candle for St. Anthony Fauci. You can get one of those today for $25 because people worshipped him so much because he wasn't Donald Trump. It was a crazy time, and it was one of their reaction, and our reaction to that is almost devastating.
So, kind of a two-point question. Should we just arbitrarily sweep this under the rug and call it a bad day? I mean, some of the things here, when Dr. Fauci was given an unconditional pardon, that obviously was an admission something is really wrong. Now states are looking into, that was a federal pardon, states are looking into whether or not they can get him and still hold him accountable. The reason I bring this up, I don't know if you saw the case where the Attorney General in Missouri had a $24 billion settlement against China on the whole COVID issue. China never showed up for the trial. China lost the case, and so no intentions of paying the $24 billion, but that opened the door for Missouri to go seize all of China's assets in the state. This is a big deal. And you wonder if that is something that could be seriously looked at down the road.
That's interesting. Part of people, human nature, we want a little bit of retribution, and that's not always wrong. Mm-hmm. The first step should be, how do we ensure that this type of internal corruption won't happen the next time around? Mm. And that's why and we're seeing the Trump administration do this. They go in and we can look at USAID or even Voice of America. They say these organizations are fundamentally corrupt. They might be doing a lot of great things. I mean, a lot of conservatives, for good reason, don't like the WHO because they lied, they backed up for China, they were nonsense up there. But they do lots of good stuff. So I think it's appropriate for what we've seen this administration do, and it's one of the reasons it answers your earlier question with your co-host earlier, was one of the reasons why people hate them is because they are tearing these organizations up and they're going to rebuild what they do. So it's very easy to say, oh my gosh, there are now, I don't know, children in Nairobi who won't get a vaccination because USAID has been either temporarily or parts of it will be permanently pulled off. But it's the only way to rebuild these organizations that have been corrupted to the core with self-protection or with political purposes. So kind of related to that, it's like he defunded the WHO and pulled our funding out of it. So on one hand, some people are absolutely horrified by that, but that's the only way that you're going to make it so that the next time a virus comes around that kills tens of millions of people, that they're not acting in a corrupt way unless you get a complete change of leadership and guidelines there.
You know what's so interesting? Only can government create an agency, throw millions, if not billions of dollars at it, have it operate in a deficit, and call it successful.
No, when you make up the rules, you always win.
Yeah.
If I could make up the rules of every game I played, I'd might be boring at a certain point, but you'd win all of them.
So let me swing your attention over to the other story, and that is this rogue U.S. District Court judge that is now trying to stop Trump, and then the appeals court sided with him yesterday. Where do you think this is going, and do you think it'll go as far as the Congress changing the role of a district judge?
These are super complicated matters when it comes to, I mean, you certainly don't want judges overreaching and saying, deciding that they're the president of the United States. And that's the conservative take on most of these. On the other hand, the president, when he calls in war powers acts and certain things, there are matters of law that he and the administration need to properly go within. So I'm willing to let that one kind of burble its way up. I see smart people on the conservative side who say that the administration shouldn't be doing it the way they're doing it. I'm not bright enough to know whether it's a rogue judge or a rogue administration on some of these narrow matters. I don't think it's this is the most terrible thing. This is being stopped. The Trump administration is throwing all of their pieces out there and doing 50 things, 500 things, all simultaneously. And if they get stymied by a couple judges here, there is a pretty good process between circuit court judge to the 3-person appeals court to the full district appeals court, working its way up to the Supreme Court. I have enough confidence in the Supreme Court that they won't necessarily rubber stamp everything like Democrats think that they'll do, that the president wants, but that they'll give everything a fair hearing and that they'll make smart decisions. So I don't get too wee-weed up over those smaller things. I mean, they're doing that. I've never seen an administration move with this kind of speed and try to change government this much, certainly in this amount of time, even over a whole term. I've not seen some administrations do this much, and they'll be temporarily stymied by some of these courts, but I don't know if we need to change the court system to take care of that. We've got a pretty good pyramid system that works its way up to the Supreme Court, and I think there's a couple dopes on that court, but most of them are pretty smart.
All right, the other big story is this chat with Signal that obviously somehow somebody from the Atlantic got involved. You unwind this. Don't get me wrong, I think the breach is serious, but the content doesn't seem to be that serious because it was something that already has happened. But obviously the left is trying to ride this horse. Where do you think this goes?
It'll eventually fizzle out. I do believe that some of that, well, no, in fact, what has been reported and what the chats were talking that bombs were going to fall at a certain time before they did. So the administration and the people in there should have just taken the loss and moved on. They did something stupid on a number of levels. The first level was using Signal as this is a commercial product. It's a pretty good commercially encrypted product, and the Houthis weren't going to be able to break that. But you shouldn't be doing that. They've got systems built in to prevent that. I was probably as bothered as anything by them coming out and saying, well, it wasn't classified information. I read it, and if that's not classified information, I mean, we didn't have exact coordinates on things, but it was pretty substantive. They just should have apologized and moved on. And whether Trump slapped one of them on the wrist or fired a lower level one, he could have done. They dug themselves a hole by saying, oh no, this guy's kind of overreaching these things, this reporter. It was a little bit of it was a lot of amateur hour by the administration. Yeah. And when you just say, wow, we really screwed up and we're sorry, usually the conversation ends. Have you ever had an employee where they've screwed up and, normally you're like, why did you, pour vinegar in the coffee or whatever that was? And the natural human reaction is to be like, oh, I didn't do that, or the bottle was the same color. And when the answer is, I really screwed up and I shouldn't have done that, and I can't believe I did, and I won't do it again.
Yeah, end of conversation.
Where do you go from there?
Well, the other part of this is that this is a result of to your earlier comment, an administration doing a lot of things fast early.
Sure.
Something's going to break. Something's going to happen along the way here.
And look, the Democrats are always going to be screaming about something. That's just part of, I mean, they were screaming when they were closing down, when they were finding government waste. They were screaming about that. And look, it's also Trump made a big deal out of saying, hey, you didn't fire any generals when they did this big screw up. Now, then we have to say, well, but a pull out of Afghanistan isn't the same as fat fingering somebody and going onto a wrong thing. Then you get into the weeds on it. But this is how politics works.
One other quick question before I let you go. There's a poll out that shows that 29% approval rating, even among Democrats, for Democrats. I mean, they seem to be collapsing from within. What's your take?
I dug into that poll. There are two aspects to look at it. One is many of those people who are critical. I mean, first of all, that is the lowest that the Democratic Party has had an approval rating gosh, I want to say in 30, 40 years. It was a long time before you saw numbers like that. Two, a lot of the people of those who are disaffected and like, I don't like the Democratic Party, they hate Republicans even more. In other words, a lot of that is because it's the far left saying you're not stopping him, you didn't close down the government. So a big a chunk of that dissatisfaction comes from the furthest left of the party, which politically kind of doesn't matter because they're still going to vote for them even if they don't like them and they wanted them to be more liberal. But the last thing that I saw in there was a good chunk. I think it was when they said, should the party move left, stay the same, or more moderate? It was like 20% wanted to go more left, 20% wanted to stay around the same, and 45% wanted to make it more moderate. And that's clearly on the things that they're getting hammered for, because the Democrats that you talk with, they still don't understand why big guys in dresses are beating women up on the volleyball court. They don't like a lot of the race stuff. So the sex stuff, the race stuff, and a number of things. I think that the president and the Republican Party now have kind of a super majority on, so that they have some flexibility to do that. And if the Democrats are smart, they say, we lost our minds on that. We actually do believe that girls and boys are different, and it's pretty easy to tell. Yeah. And move over, but right now they're still wrestling with each other and figuring it out. But they have a lot of thinking and arguing to do over the next.
Good to see you, friend. You're looking healthy, looking good.
Yeah, thank you. I am.
You're looking good. All right, check out his website, Elephants in the Rooms, and then that's YouTube.
Terrific.
At Elephants in the Rooms, and then of course his own website, kenlacorte.substack.com. Good to see you, buddy. Let's stay connected.
That'd be great. Thanks, Perry.